Once upon a time, in the beautiful village of Aguta, there lived a princess named Chichi. She was known far and wide for her breathtaking beauty and immense wealth. Chichi was the pride of her father's kingdom, a village that was the envy of all others in Igbo land. As she reached the age of marriage, suitors from every corner of the land flocked to Aguta, eager to win her hand. They came with promises of love, loyalty, and gifts beyond imagination. But Chichi knew that their hearts were not pure. Despite her beauty, Chichi harbored a deep fear, a family curse that had plagued the women in her lineage. Her mother had warned her of a mysterious illness that caused the women in their family to lose their memories around the age of 50. Chichi's greatest fear was that she would be abandoned in her time of need by a husband who loved her only for her wealth and beauty. She longed to find someone who would love her for who she truly was, someone who would stand by her side even when the ravages of time and illness took their toll. Chichi's heart was heavy with doubt as she observed the endless parade of suitors, each one more extravagant than the last. None of them seemed to care for her as a person. They were enamored by her looks and wealth. Desperate to find true love, Chichi sought the counsel of a wise seer, known for her powerful abilities. The seer Neka was an old woman with eyes that seemed to see through the very soul of a person. Chichi poured out her heart to Neka, explaining her fears and her desire to find a man who would love her for who she was, not for her title or her wealth. Neka listened intently and then asked Chichi a question that would change her life forever. Are you willing to do whatever it takes to find true love? Without hesitation, Chichi nodded. The seer then performed a powerful ritual that transformed Chichi's face, making her appear old, wrinkled, and unattractive. Chichi looked at her reflection in a small pool of water and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. But she was determined. She would find a man who could see past her appearance to the woman within. Chichi returned to her village, now unrecognizable to all who had once praised her beauty. She found herself a small, humble hut on the outskirts of Aguta and began her new life. Gone were the lavish garments and jewels that once adorned her. Now she dressed in simple, worn clothing, blending in with the common folk. As she walked through the village, she noticed how differently people treated her. The same maidens who had once envied her beauty now mocked her, laughing at her wrinkled face and old appearance. These were the same people who had once called her Princess Chichi the Beautiful, yet now they ridiculed her as if she were a stranger. The men who had once vied for her attention ignored her, looking past her as if she were invisible. Chichi's heart ached as she realized how shallow and fleeting their admiration had been. She had been nothing more than a prize to them, a trophy to be won. Despite the cruelty of those around her, Chichi remained steadfast in her resolve. She continued to live her life quietly, going to the stream to fetch water, attending village gatherings, and participating in daily chores. However, she could not help but feel the sting of loneliness as she watched the suitors who had once sought her hand now fawn over other maidens. Her disguise was working, but the loneliness was almost unbearable. Then one day during the village's maiden dance, a celebration where young women displayed their beauty and grace to potential suitors, Chichi attended, hoping to blend in with the crowd. As she stood at the edge of the gathering, ignored by the other maidens and shunned by the men, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Chima, the son of the village scholar. Chima had been her childhood friend, but as they grew older, their paths had diverged. He had always been kind and intelligent, but because of her royal status, Chichi had never considered him as a potential suitor. Little did she know, Chima had harbored feelings for her all along. Chima, now a respected scholar in the village, had come to the maiden dance with no intention of finding a wife. His heart had long been captivated by the princess, but he knew that someone of his status could never hope to marry her. As he scanned the gathering, his eyes fell upon a woman who seemed out of place. She was old and wrinkled, yet there was something familiar about her. Unable to resist his curiosity, Chima approached her and struck up a conversation. "Good evening, dear," he greeted her warmly despite her appearance. "Are you here to enjoy the festivities as well?" Chichi, startled by his kindness, replied softly, "Yes, I am here, though I do not think anyone would want to dance with me." Chima chuckled. "Nonsense. Every woman deserves to enjoy herself, no matter her appearance." As they continued to talk, Chima found himself drawn to the woman. There was something in her voice, something in the way she spoke that reminded him of his childhood friend, the princess. But he quickly dismissed the thought. After all, what would a princess be doing here, disguised as an old woman? As the evening wore on, Chima and Chichi found themselves laughing and talking as if they had known each other for years. The other villagers looked on in bewilderment, wondering why the handsome scholar was wasting his time with such an unattractive woman. But Chima did not care. He was enjoying the conversation far too much. As the night ended, Chima asked Chichi if he could visit her sometime, to which she agreed. Chichi was surprised by how comfortable she felt around Chima, and as she returned to her humble hut that night, she couldn't help but smile. Perhaps there was hope after all. In the weeks that followed, Chima kept his promise and visited Chichi regularly. They would meet under the large ancient tree that stood at the center of the village, a place where they could talk undisturbed. As they spent more time together, their friendship deepened. Chichi, still in disguise, found herself falling for Chima. His kindness, intelligence, and gentle nature were everything she had ever wanted in a partner. But she also knew that she could not reveal her true identity until she was certain of his feelings. One day, as they sat under the tree, Chichi mustered the courage to ask Chima a question that had been weighing on her mind. Chima, is there anyone you love? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Chima hesitated for a moment before answering. Yes, there is someone I have loved for a long time, but I do not think it is possible for us to be together. Chi-Chi's heart sank at his words, but she forced herself to smile. Who is she? She asked, hoping against hope that he would not say the name she dreaded. Chima looked away, his expression pained. She is someone I knew when I was younger, but she is of a higher status than I am. I do not think she would ever consider me. Chichi felt a pang of guilt as she realized that Chima was talking about her, the real her. She had been so focused on finding true love that she had never considered the possibility that the one she sought had been right in front of her all along. But now, disguised as Oge, she could see the depth of Chima's feelings. He loved her for who she was, not for her title or her wealth. And yet she could not bring herself to tell him the truth, not yet. As their friendship continued to blossom, Chichi struggled with her feelings. She had set out on this journey to find true love, and now she was faced with the reality that the man she loved had been in her life all along. But how could she tell him the truth without risking everything? What if Chima felt betrayed when he found out that OJ and Princess Chichi were the same person? One evening, as they sat under their usual tree, Chima suddenly became serious. OJ, he began, using the name she had given him, I need to tell you something. Chichi's heart raced as she waited for him to continue. I have developed feelings for you despite everything, but my heart is divided. I still love the princess, even though I know it is a foolish dream. I feel as though I am being torn in two. Chichi's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to reach out and tell him that he was not being foolish, that his feelings were not divided at all. But instead she found herself saying, Chima, you must follow your heart. If you truly love the princess, you should pursue her. Chima looked at her, confusion and sorrow written on his face. But what about you, Oge? I don't want to hurt you. Chichi forced a smile and said, I will be fine, Chima. You deserve to be happy, even if it means being with someone else. Chima nodded slowly, though his heart was heavy. He did not want to lose Oge, but he also could not deny the love he had carried for Princess Chichi all these years. As they parted that night, Chichi knew that she had to make a decision. She could not continue to deceive Chima, but she was terrified of what would happen when the truth came out. Unable to bear the thought of losing Chima, Chichi decided to return to the seer Neka to undo the spell. The seer greeted her with a knowing smile. So, you have found love, haven't you? She asked. Chichi nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, but it's complicated. The man I love also loves me, but he doesn't know it's me. Neka chuckled softly. Love is always complicated, my dear, but you have learned the true nature of the heart. Now, are you ready to reveal your true self? Chichi hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The seer performed the ritual once more, and Chichi watched as her reflection in the water changed back to her true form. She was beautiful again, but the experience had changed her. She no longer cared about her outward appearance. What mattered now was the love she had found. After the ritual, Chichi returned to her village, but she did not go back to her palace right away. She needed time to think, to prepare herself for what she had to do next. She knew she had to confront Chima and tell him the truth, but she also knew that this revelation could change everything. When she finally returned to her father's palace, she told him that she had been on a journey to seek guidance from her mother's spirit. She then announced that she had found the man she wanted to marry. Her father, King Anozi, was taken aback. "Who is this man?" he asked, surprised by her sudden decision. "It is Chima, the scholar's son," Chichi replied, her voice steady. The king was shocked, for he knew Chima as a wise and kind man, but he had never considered him as a match for his daughter. However, he respected Chichi's decision and agreed to the marriage. Word spread quickly throughout the village that the princess had chosen a husband, and all the single men were summoned to present themselves before her. Chima, however, was not interested. His thoughts were consumed with Oje, the woman who had mysteriously vanished from his life. He had searched for her everywhere but could find no trace of her. When the day came for the men to gather, Chima reluctantly attended, not because he believed he would be chosen, but because he felt it was his duty. He dressed in his simplest attire, still preoccupied with finding Oge. As the other men tried to dazzle the princess with their fine clothes and gifts, Chima stood quietly at the back, hoping the event would end soon so he could resume his search. As Princess Chichi walked among the men, her heart pounded in her chest. She could see the anticipation in their eyes, but she was not interested in any of them. She searched the crowd until she found Chima standing at the edge, looking distracted and uninterested. With a determined smile, she walked straight to him and took his hand. "This is the man I will marry," she declared loudly. The crowd gasped in shock, and Chima stared at her in disbelief. "But, Your Highness," he stammered, still unable to comprehend what was happening. Chichi simply smiled and said, "We have much to discuss, Chima. Let us walk together." The villagers watched in stunned silence as the princess led Chima away. They could hardly believe that she had chosen a scholar's son over all the wealthy and powerful men who had sought her hand. As they walked away from the gathering, Chima's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. He could not understand why the princess had chosen him, especially when his heart was still conflicted over Oge. When they reached a quiet spot, Chichi stopped and turned to face him. "Chima, there is something I must tell you," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "The woman you knew as Oge, she was me." Chima's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" he asked, struggling to make sense of her words. Chichi took a deep breath and explained everything: the curse on her family, her desire to find true love, and the seer's spell that had transformed her into an old, unattractive woman. "I became Oge so that I could find someone who would love me for who I am, not for my title or my wealth," she said. "And you, Chima, have shown me that love." Chima was silent for a long moment as he absorbed her words. He remembered the strange familiarity he had felt with Oje, the way she had seemed so different from anyone else he had ever met, and now he understood why. "So you were Oge all along," he murmured, finally understanding. Chichi nodded, tears in her eyes. "I didn't mean to deceive you, Chima. I just needed to know if you could love me for who I truly am." Chima reached out and took her hands in his. "Chichi, I fell in love with Oge, not because of how she looked, but because of who she was. And now I realize that I have always loved you, whether as Oge or as Princess Chichi. It was never about your title or your wealth. It was always about you." Chichi's heart swelled with joy and relief as she heard his words. For the first time in her life, she felt truly loved for who she was. The village of Aguta buzzed with excitement as preparations for the royal wedding began. The news of Princess Chichi's engagement to Chima had spread like wildfire, and while many were surprised by her choice, they respected her decision. King Anozi spared no expense in organizing the grandest celebration the village had ever seen. The palace was adorned with colorful decorations, and the aroma of delicious food filled the air. Chichi, dressed in the finest traditional attire, looked more radiant than ever. Her heart was light, and her spirit was at peace. She had found the love she had longed for, and she knew that her life with Chima would be filled with happiness and mutual respect. Chima, too, felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as the wedding day approached. He was about to marry the woman he had loved since childhood, and yet there was still a part of him that found it hard to believe that this was all real. As he stood before the gathered villagers, waiting for Chichi to arrive, his thoughts drifted to the journey they had taken to reach this moment. From their childhood friendship to their chance reunion under the ancient tree, to the revelation of Chichi's true identity, it had all led them to this day. When Chichi finally appeared, escorted by her father, Chima felt a surge of emotion that nearly overwhelmed him. She was more beautiful than ever, and yet it was her inner beauty that shone the brightest in his eyes. As they exchanged their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, the villagers cheered and celebrated. It was a union that had defied expectations and proven that true love could indeed conquer all. With the wedding celebrations behind them, Chichi and Chima began their new life together as husband and wife. They moved into a beautiful home near the palace, where they could be close to the king while also maintaining a sense of independence. Chichi took on the role of a supportive wife, helping Chima in his work as the village scholar. Together, they established a school where both men and women could learn about various subjects, from geography to agriculture. The school quickly became a beacon of knowledge in Aguta, attracting students from neighboring villages as well. Chichi found great fulfillment in her work, especially in mentoring the young maidens of the village. She taught them not only practical skills but also the importance of self-respect and kindness. The experiences she had gone through had changed her perspective on life, and she wanted to share those lessons with others. Chima too was thriving in his new role. He loved teaching and found great joy in seeing his students succeed. But more than anything, he cherished the partnership he had with Chichi. She was not just his wife, she was his equal, his confidant, and his greatest supporter. Together, they were a formidable team, working tirelessly to improve the lives of those around them. The village prospered under their guidance, and the people of Aguta came to see them as a symbol of love, wisdom, and unity. But despite their busy lives, Chichi and Chima never forgot to make time for each other. They often took walks together in the evenings, reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. Their love had been tested and proven true, and they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And they lived happily ever after.
If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, subscribe. Watch our other interesting videos posted on our channel. We cannot wait to have you as a member of our AfricanFolktales TV Addict channel. Thank you so much for your support.